Hey, welcome to the Pitch Black Unboxing Show. We have got an absolute treat for you today.
A real treat.
A real treat. We've been so excited preparing for this interview, but we have got the one and only Mr. Eric Collins with us today.
Well, hey.
Eric Collins, welcome.
Thank you very much, Judy. Thank you very much, Colin, for having me. It's great to be on the Unboxing Show by Pitch Black.
Absolutely. Now, I came across you, Eric, when you did The Moneymaker on Channel 4. In fact, it was Judy who said, you have got to watch this show. So we tuned in and we absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And I think there were a couple of things that stood out. I think there were three things that really made us think, this guy is going to be the catalyst and the author of a lot of game changing here in the UK. The first thing is I saw your empathy, and it made sense once I read the book, which we'll talk about in a bit. But your empathy in terms of just really being passionate about Black empowerment. And I also saw your authenticity in, this wasn't just a show.
Yeah.
It seemed like your normal conversations where cameras just happened to be present. So that really came across. And then we saw your tenacity. You didn't take any nonsense. You told it like it is with a smile, and sometimes with a straight face, but it was gold dust. And, we thought this is a guy to watch and to follow. And so, hey, we love having you here in the UK, and we love having you here on the show.
I'm flattered and beyond thrilled that you found, you've unpacked some of the things that were so important for me in that program and doing that program. I mean, obviously I'm not unlike you all, I'm not a presenter. That is not what I do. I'm an investor. And I'm a person who hopefully through my investing is helping change to happen. And so when given the opportunity to be on a primetime television show, major network in the UK, I didn't just think, oh my goodness, great, I get to be a presenter. It was, what are both the formal and informal messages, the explicit and implicit? Can we show women in various roles as the authority figure? Can we actually show Black companies that are doing something novel and interesting? Can we show young people making a way during tough times? So I'm glad that you got all those sorts of things. I think many people found it entertaining, but to find that there are these other sort of messages, hopefully, that actually did squeak through or even sort of scream through. That's good to know. That's very satisfying.
And listen, anybody who's watching this show and you haven't watched The Moneymaker on Channel 4, as soon as you finish this one, make sure you go to Channel 4 and it's still there on demand. You will not regret it. So hey, welcome. And so, of course, you are the CEO of Impact X Capital. So you are a venture capitalist. And I know in some circles that's a dirty word, but I think when it comes to your passion and your focus and your aims and objectives, actually, you try to clean up the word venture capitalists, or clean up venture capitalism. So Impact X Capital is your primary vehicle. And then, of course, you are the author of the newly released book. We Don't Need Permission, which I absolutely loved. How Black businesses can change our world. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So first of all, Eric, tell us a little bit about your early influences. Tell us a little bit about your early life.
My early life, I'm an American who, unlike many people here in the UK, I came from the American South. So my family hails from the place that Jim Crow existed and segregation, slavery existed. That's where the Collins family was born, was imported, and then we lived for centuries, in fact, in that part of the world. I was born in the very deep South in Alabama, and on a historically Black university campus called Tuskegee. Some people know it because of the Tuskegee Airmen. Some people know it because of the Commodores. There are various reasons why people know, but that's where I was born. And so and I was born during the Civil Rights Movement. So I was born during a time when there was a switch coming in the United States between sort of laws that kept Black people in their place and in their space, and there was a growing freedom. And in fact, as I like to tell everyone, I'm the first person in my family. That's over the decades and centuries we've been here, and we've been there in the United States. And over the many generations that have gone before me, I was the first person born with the right to vote in the United States and guaranteed the right to vote as a Black person.
Wow.
So being born into that situation, people who come from, Black countries and where Black rule has existed, they understand one sort of thing. My existence has been one like that. So, sort of an underdog in that respect, but coming from a family who didn't think of themselves as underdogs, coming from a family who felt that our job was, if we had education, if we had capital, was social change and to make our way in the world, not just for ourselves, but for everyone else who looked like us or who identified with us. They didn't have to be Black. They didn't have to be from the South. They didn't have to be, agricultural in terms of their base, but they needed to be some people who felt that the world could be a better place.
Okay.
And the influences that I had, Judy and Colin, I had to pick up from various places. Sometimes you could see the Supremes on television, or sometimes you could see, Richard Pryor in a very tame set. Sometimes you could do any number of things. But one thing that I did was I read a lot. And some of the things that I read were things like, were things that encouraged, me and my Blackness. And that was Ebony Magazine and Black Enterprise. I thought that those were seminal pieces of creating my worldview and making me the person that I am, which is why I'm so happy talking to you, that you all have a magazine, that you have a forum in which you're depicting and you're presenting these sort of images and these sorts of opportunities to talk about aspirationally what it is that we are accurately, and then what we can be aspirationally. That's all very important.
Fantastic. Okay.
So, Eric, I'd like to ask you then, who were your early role models before getting into your serial entrepreneurship? Because it's not just one thing. Yeah. Who were those early inspirations?
But Judy, I don't know if you're like me, but that my early inspiration was very close to home. I have an older brother who's 3 years older than me. He's 3 grades ahead of me in school. So it was always Bradley. And first child, he was the prince, he's the prince, and I'm the heir to the throne. And then there's me, sort of a secondary character like Harry. And then there's my sister below, who's sort of a princess, who is Czarina in waiting. So I'm sort of stuck in the middle. But I had a brother who I could imitate and emulate everything that he did, because he did so many fascinating things. And then I had parents who made a conscious decision about how they were going to raise their children. And again, raised us in the Deep South during the time of segregation, and then moved us outside of New York City, but then moved us again down to the South, to Greensboro, North Carolina. And Greensboro, North Carolina is where the sit-in movement started. Students sitting in a Woolworth, the lunch counter, that's where it started. They moved us from a very leafy and very progressive suburb outside of New York City, where you could, drive into the city, at a moment's notice, and took us down to a place that was sort of another hotbed of change, because my parents felt that that was sort of their job. And so they were always these disruptors. So my first people in personal life, in my idea of civic duty, are my parents, Henry and Adeline Collins, to whom I dedicated the book. And I call them my first investors, because that's what they did. They invested a huge amount of themselves, all of their resources and aspirations, into us. Now, my father had a PhD. My mother had a master's degree. Dad was a professor at a university, and then he went to a Swiss chemical company as an executive. So you know, I had a bit of a different life, but part of what they were doing was trying to create a disruptive path.
Yeah.
They were saying that you didn't have to, Eric, you don't have to be a doctor, you don't have to be a lawyer to be a successful person as a Black person. What you could do is you can be within these other sort of contexts and these other environments, and you can make a change there and you can make a difference. And so I followed that, and look at him. Dad was, you know, going back and forth to Switzerland in the 70s, and here I am living in the UK, you know, doing things across the pond, so to speak.
Yeah, that sounds great. And where you said you don't know whether you're anything like me. Well, there are some similarities. I am a middle child with an older brother who, yes, is a role model. And my mother was an educator as well. And for me, what I saw there was that persistence to kind of like have that legacy of you can achieve this, where, coming to England, she had to go back to university. She was a qualified teacher from back home, and she had to go back and do that again. And she did that. And so, I've had that opportunity.
Fantastic.
Lots of similarities there. In the book, you refer to your mother as the disruptor, the Collins disruptor in chief, which I thought was really, really good. Tell us a little bit about your initial or first exposure to Black business around that time. You know, what did that mean, and how did that help to shape some of your thinking now around Black empowerment?
So one of the great things about living as I did during a time where segregation was giving way to integration in the United States was that you had this legacy of Black institutions, whether they be the 100+ Black colleges and universities, the historically Black colleges and universities that existed in the US, from Howard University, which everyone's heard of, to Fisk University, to Hampton University, to Spelman. All of those things existed and were producing people who were doing all sorts of things, from artists to surgeons. It was just a broad range, to engineers. You know, people were getting, and had been for generations, getting their start educationally there. Then you also had Black insurance companies, you had Black banks, you had Black doctors and lawyers and law firms, you had your Black dentists. All of these things existed. And these are the sort of places in which we existed. I until I went away to university, I lived in a 100% Black neighborhood.
Wow.
From the time I was born. We did not really have white neighbors. We went to schools that our neighborhood fed into schools. So I always went to school that was state funded. And so you would fed into schools that were sort of integrated, but I always lived in Black neighborhoods where there was safety, where there was affirmation and all sorts of things. So my exposure to Black business happened because of segregation.
Okay.
There were all of the people who served us, you know, the people who kept me healthy, the people who made sure that we were buying the right car, the people who built our house, the people who did everything. It's as if we were living in Wakanda, right? We were living in a place of what is known as Black excellence, and everyone was serving the needs. And if I had an issue that I need to interview somebody, or I need to find out something, I needed to get a connection to, or you know, all of those things happened in the Black community. So my exposure very early was small scale and some large scale. I mean, North Carolina Mutual, which is a very large Black insurance company, was in North Carolina. So I was exposed to those things. The Black newspaper for us, it was the, not the Greensboro News and Record, but there was the Peacemaker. Was the newspaper that we actually read. There was the local newspaper for Black for the Black audience. Dr. Kilimanjaro ran that. And I was down the street from Bennett College, the oldest Black women's university in the United States, and down the street from North Carolina A&T State University, who had the most fantastic and fabulous homecoming in the world. And therefore I was exposed to all those businesses that served them, from the person who was selling, you know, sandwiches at homecoming, you know, on a hot plate, to those sort of two places that were selling insurance and creating all sorts of interesting financial products to serve the world. That's where I had. I didn't think of it as strange. That's the other thing. It was not exceptional. It was just like that's who I'd expect, and it's the same thing I have today. If I need a lawyer, I would expect it to be a Black woman. If I need an accountant, I expect it to be a Black woman. It's just that's what I would know. I would not have thought that the way to get better service is that person would be racially different from me, or would live in a different sort of a neighborhood, or had different sort of experiences. That's the experience that I had of Black business from an early age. I was immersed in it.
Wow, that is amazing. And I think so many of us are looking for that, and another reason why we're so excited to have the Gold Dust book, you know, to help navigate and just bring some of that change, disrupt and bring some of that change about. So with all of these wonderful businesses that you have and you do, can I ask, what was the motivation and the inspiration behind the first one, the first idea?
The first idea that I actually started?
Yeah.
Wow. You know, I think that's interesting. The inspiration was really that if we didn't do this, who was going to do it?
Yeah.
And who better to do it than us? And let me be clear, although I'd love to say that my first business was not only you know, an unqualified success, but that also was in some rarefied space, that I had figured out a way to treat sickle cell using artificial intelligence. My first business was with some friends from law school, and we made a movie. That was my first business that we started. We started a production company, and then we started also a holding company called Sweaty Palm Productions and Gravy Train.
Yeah.
And we started, we got together and said, here's a story that one of us had written, and let's make it into a feature-length film, because, you know, there are not enough films that are featuring women of color in strong professional roles that help to see not only can they be, you know, fantastic in terms of the work that they're doing, but they also have personal lives. They also have family drama. They have all of that, and still they function very, very effectively in the world in which they inhabit. And so that's where we started the company that created the movie Legal Deceit, which was originally titled The Promised Land, but that's been taken by somebody else. We love the title The Promised Land, but when we sold the film, people said, well, Legal Deceit, people understand sort of what's in the box. It's like, here's legal. It was at a time when Tom Cruise had made a film about the law. And so it was like, so the law and LA law was on television in the United States. So there were a number of reasons why trying to really use the tailwinds of the legal drama to actually do this independent film. And so there you go. That was my first foray right there.
Ah,
okay.
Eric Collins, the movie maker.
The movie maker.
And still making moves.
I want you to look up that movie. I want you to look up it on Rotten Tomatoes and see the reviews. I'm not sure if you say Eric Collins, the movie maker. I think you said something else.
Legal Deceit. However, you must have loved that title, The Promised Land, because it became the title of the preface to the book.
Absolutely.
So I remember that. So along that journey, you know, starting Gravy Train Productions, and what was the other title? Sweaty Palms.
Sweaty Palms.
What were some of the lessons on the journey? Some of the highlights, some of the pitfalls along that entrepreneurial journey of setting up those two production companies?
The first lesson was that raising money by us was the way to go. That our people, there were pockets of capital that existed, and our people, when they understood what it is that we were trying to achieve, would put their capital behind that. You know, and they give until not only it helped, but give until it hurt. And so that was what we noted. So we put together this company, and people contributed capital, and we were able to make the film. I think we only raised $300,000, but you know, that was a huge amount of money for people who've never made a film. You're able to find maybe 25, 30 people, and you raise $300,000. And this is the 1990s in order to make a film. So that was one thing. And that if you rely upon that same community, sort of a Black community, people who look like us, they will also come to your aid, because out of the woodwork, you will find all sorts of competence. So you'll find a lighting director. You'll find, of course, you'll find a makeup artist. Of course, you'll find a stylist, but you'll also find an editor. You'll find the person who's going to do your casting, and people will contribute because they see an opportunity to make a difference. And that's the lesson that I learned. When you need to make a difference, rely on people who want to make a similar difference. You can rely on allies, but allies you get to negotiate with, and negotiating with them to say that your lived experience or your worldview is legitimate with a few tweaks. And the way that you want to approach things is useful with a few more tweaks. You end up compromising even before you start, possibly what that vision is. Whereas with our people, and I'm going to say our people because it can be writ large. It doesn't necessarily have to be, people who are from the African diaspora, but our people are people to be relied upon. And that's something I've noticed here in the UK when we started Impact X. That same lesson, that's where we started. We raised, several millions from Black people in a very short period of time to make possible the investing in Black businesses so that we could try and help create more of this world that I had grown up with, where there were Black businesses hiring Black people, giving internships to young people, giving opportunity to people who come out of prison, all sorts of things happen in that community. Let's make sure that we have it here. And I see many elements of that going on today here in the UK. And I'm so pleased that Impact X can be part of it. And the lesson that I drew from my early experience with entrepreneurship continues to be true. And on both sides of the Atlantic, it continues to be true.
And brilliant.
So of course, it's, I think when you get our people involved in our projects, it's no longer just a job, it's a mission because you've got shared values. And in a way that you don't always have with allies.
And I wonder, you all, I worry when I watch people and I look at people, and the first step is to go outside of the community. That's because, and I worry that people have actually internalized something about what the community can provide. It's like that you wouldn't want to work for a Black boss, or you wouldn't want to work for a female boss, or it's hard because we are harder on each other. I just am always perplexed when I hear that sort of thing, and distressed. In fact, it's not just perplexed, but distressed that, this idea somehow that being the only one is a good thing. Being, reflection of that exceptionalism, not excellence, but exceptionalism. We are the exception to the rule and want to be known as the exception to the rule. And whether that be done on an individual level or a group level, I want to be known as being African American, because we African Americans are different from, UK, Caribbean, Black, Caribbeans and Black Africans. We are just very different from the Nigerians and the Ugandans, and we're very different from the South Africans. That kind of separation worries me when I hear people talking about that, because it feels to me as though there's an internalizing of sort of white supremacy. And somehow, by differentiating myself from the mass, I will therefore be more acceptable and able to do things. Now, I might, with my access and with my ability to work from the inside, I might be able to do great things. That's what people might be thinking, and then I'll make a way for other people. But I've got to separate myself from the negatives associated with my people before I can actually then help my people. And that's something that I just don't believe in. I just don't believe in.
I think the thing to bear in mind is when you were growing up, you had a world where everybody of excellence, of value, who were contributing to your life looked like you. Unfortunately, in the UK, that isn't always the experience of the UK Black Brit, or the Black Brit rather. So there is this internalization of, okay, if what I see doesn't look like me, then I've got to almost be exceptional to be a part of that. And that's what we're trying to replace and change the worldview by saying, actually, on the covers of this magazine, everybody looks like you and everybody is excellent, and therefore so can you be too. So that's the message.
I so want, it's so enervating, takes away your energy to have to fight that fight, the fight of there are other people who can do it better and are better than me, just because of the outside wrapping. And I find it very, very challenging. That's what we fight against at Impact X all the time. We fight the powers that be, right? We fight white men who are investors around the world and have responsibility for capital, and who gets it and who doesn't. We fight that. When we sometimes have to fight it within the community, and I consider it all a community. I don't consider several different communities. Birmingham is the same community. Edinburgh is the same community. Glasgow is the same community. It's all just the community. Brixton is the same community. Wapping, which is where I am now, is the same community. So that's how I think about those types of things. And Impact X, that's how we behave. We behave in a very sort of we are aligned in this respect. And those differences we love because it gives me jollof rice as well as it gives me rice and peas. So that's good.
Now you're talking.
It gives me both of those things. So I like the differences, but it all comes from the same loving space. And so that's
That's brilliant. I was going to ask you about telling us a little bit more about Impact X and the double bottom line.
Yeah. Do you know what that's about? So when you think about what you're going to achieve as an investor, you've got to lay out that we have a thesis and we have some goals.
Yeah.
And what are the goals advancing? So one goal is certainly that we can create wealth for the people who invest in us. But that's sort of table stakes. If you're going to be an investor of someone else's money, I don't know many people who give you money and say, I want you to lose it all. Most people say, I'd like to have it back. And then particularly if you're doing it for organizations, the reason they want it back is often because it helps to advance other causes.
Yes.
So if I want to do charitable things and philanthropic things, I need the capital to be able to do that. So that's another piece of that equation. So we have as our primary focus and our first bottom line, returning capital. And in our first fund, 100% of the investors are Black people, either from the West Coast or the East Coast of the United States, from the UK, or from France. So we are very pleased to return their capital. And at the moment, we're returning, we've only been in business for 3 years of investing, and we're returning 4.5 times what they put in. That's the value of what they put in. And that's good. That's good in the world of venture capital. Even though we have somewhat of a bad name, that's a good return to have for your investors. Beyond that, we think that it's absolutely necessary if we're going to have social change, not to just put money in the hands of a few people, a few institutions, which they can then do whatever they want with. But we also believe it's necessary to create opportunities called jobs. So if you create organizations, those organizations create jobs. If you create jobs, people can grow in the organization and move up the ladder. They can actually go onto another organization, and that other organization sort of helps to colonize it from this first organization. And then finally, they're also in a position to be able to start their own organizations with the right sort of background. People who came out of Meta or Facebook years ago, you hear about them in all sorts of organizations. Again, they colonize other organizations, but then they start a lot of organizations of their own. That's an important piece to us because we know that one of those or some of those or many of those are going to exit. And when they exit, the thing that happens is a lot of wealth is distributed. And that wealth can then be used for philanthropic reasons, paying off your student loans, buying a house. All those things are fine, but will also be used to seed the next generation. Those individuals who are coming after you who have similar aspirations. And therefore, not only do we have Impact X's money going into and creating this double bottom line, but then we have other people's going in. And therefore, we create a bigger and bigger opportunity and a faster and faster moving flywheel. And so you get better and better results. And therefore, we can build our ecosystem that's necessary faster. We can have more of this, these Black businesses and the like. Can I give you one example?
Of course, please.
We have an organization that we invested in called Marshmallow, which is an insurtech company started by twins here in London. Now, the story of them is very famous because people found out in 2021 that they had become a unicorn. So a unicorn meaning they had $1 billion they were valued at $1 billion. We invested when they were worth 30 million. 30 million, and 18 months after we invest, they're worth 1.2 billion. So can you imagine how much wealth is created from the investment that we made? And we were able to work with the organization. We have a tiny piece of the business, but it's worth a lot of money. And so that is a fantastic opportunity. The double bottom line piece is that they have been able to maintain over the life of the organization. They've doubled in terms of the amount of employees year after year. And they still maintain 50% women, which is almost twice as much as what you see in most technology companies, and 20% Black people of color. And these are key positions, not just, in entry-level positions, not in training programs, but in key decision-making positions within the organization, not just in treasury, not just in HR, but throughout the organization, including in the technology organization, in the C-suite, et cetera. That is the kind of change that we wish to make. That's the kind of secondary bottom line. So that's the double bottom line that we wish to have happen. And it has been for us a fantastic example of what Impact X seeks to be able to accomplish.
It absolutely sounds it. I mean, I'm gonna now ask you a question which I know is going to be a difficult one to answer, and it's, what do you most enjoy about what you do? I know it's going to be hard to choose one, because clearly from all we've been hearing, you are just enthusing about what you do. It's passion. In fact, in a little way, you strike me as, I'm not sure if it's a business politician or a political businessman, but for you, it's not just about the numbers. It's about the change. It's about moving the game on.
You know what I like most, and I'm flattered. Again, you all have flattered me greatly in this interview. And I hope my mother listens to this and then believes that.
Adeline, he's turned out well.
Adeline, exactly. He's okay. He's okay across the pond. I would say that being able to be a leader among a group of people who want the world to be a better place for lots of people, broadly wants the world to be a better place. Like your mission at the magazine is to make sure that that we are seeing images and we're hearing things that's better for everyone. It's great for Black businesses to grow and prosper. It's good for the British economy. It's good for the world. It's estimated that in the United States alone, because of the underinvestment in Black business, there's $1 trillion of gross domestic product which is lost annually. $1 trillion. Because there's not enough money going into Black businesses, and particularly among Black women. Black women are the fastest growing sector of entrepreneurs in the world. In the UK, the same thing, the fastest growing sector. Now, part of that's for good reason and part of it's for bad reasons. Part of it is because we're finding with motherhood the issues of being in the workforce and having the flexibility needed to have primary responsibility for home and hearth. We find it because women are not finding themselves getting advanced within the organization and needing to create their own ways. We find that the needs that are associated with the markets that they're part of are just not being addressed. So they need to make sure that these things get addressed. And then we find that also when things go sour in an economy like it is going now, often the first people that are released are women. And so all of those things are leading to more women who need to or want to start businesses. And yet, the failure rate, think about at the beginning of COVID, the failure rate for Black businesses in the first month of lockdown in the United States, 40% of Black businesses closed between March and April of 2020. That number indicates how precarious is the situation and how concentrated we are in organizations and businesses that are very susceptible to short-term economic headwinds.
Yeah.
And so so when I say what do I most enjoy, I think working against those dynamics, working against what need not be for us a story that is immutable. We believe the story can be changed, and we believe the story at Impact X can be changed within a generation.
Absolutely.
Because if you think about Elon Musk, you'll open your newspaper today, whether you're in Belgium, whether you're in the Congo, whether you're in Brooklyn in New York City, you open your newspaper and Elon Musk will be somewhere in your newspaper. And we didn't know Elon Musk 15 years ago. Yeah. If we had a Black woman who had started an organization like Tesla in that scale, and Impact X believes that there is a Black woman, and we believe there are many Black women who can start like this, that indeed by investing in them and helping them to grow, we will have people who can not only create, billionaires and the richest people in the world, but then beyond that, they'll create a lot of other jobs and a lot of other opportunities for a lot of other people, millionaires, and maybe even some billionaires. And those people will again, and I'm going to use this term very specifically, colonize the world. And they will change the way that the world functions and the business world functions. Yeah. And that's what we want to have happen. We want that Black woman from Bristol or Birmingham, we want her to then be asked by every government to be part of a conversation about economic policy. We want her to be in court every day trying to talk about sort of what is the role of employment. We want that organization. It's not fun to be sued, but if you're sued, that means you're important enough to be actually looked at and not overlooked. So we want her to be part of all the conversations in every economy. And that's the difference. That's what we've never had. Think about it. There's never been a Fortune 500 company started by a Black person. And there's never been a FTSE 100, 200, 300 company started by a Black person. And if we had some of those, then we can also hire all the Black lawyers we want. We can hire all create all the Black banks that we wish, all those sorts of things will happen.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Good.
It's amazing.
We're right behind you.
You're right next to me. We're going to do this together.
Right beside you, even.
Yeah, there you go. We're doing this together.
This is it. This is it. I'm loving what you're saying, Eric. You know, I'm a Black woman from Birmingham. I'm loving what you're saying, and we're in agreement with what you're doing. This whole aim. It's amazing. It really is amazing. Now, we're also very privileged to have you over here because you are profiled and described as an African American. So I want to ask you, how long have you actually been in the UK? And do you see yourself as American now or British? How do you identify?
Well, I want to be, I'm going to have my coming out now. I, since December of 2020, have been a Black Brit. So
wow.
I'm
Welcome.
so, and which indicates sort of how long I've been here, right? So I have been here since 2014. I came to help run an organization that was an artificial intelligence company working in the consumer tech space. So if you are using your cell phone while you're listening to this and multitasking, and you're spelling out words that are you put in 1 or 2 letters and it predicts the rest of the word. That's the technology that I was a part of here in the UK. Okay. It was called SwiftKey. We sold to Microsoft back in 2016. So I got here in 2014. By 2016, I'd worked myself out of a job. And then I went to another organization where I worked myself out of a job again, and we sold to Medtronic, another US company. So I have been in the privileged situation of coming to work. I am an immigrant and I'm a worker. I'm sort of like the people who came on the Windrush.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I came because the Brits said we need some people to help work. Yeah. And this is the kind of work that we think that you can uniquely, and to help build our economy. And that's what I've been doing ever since I got here.
Okay.
Oh, we're very privileged to have you.
Absolutely. Welcome, fellow Black Brits.
Thank you very much. I now, I have more steps to take, I'm sure, because passports and other sorts of things. I haven't gotten a passport, so that's something I still have to work on.
Okay. And I'm sure since you've been here, you've seen some key differences between America for African Americans and the UK for Black Brits. And I was watching a clip of Rick Lewis, who I believe is the chairman of Impact X Capital, and he runs something called Tristan Capital Partners. And one of the things he was saying when he got here, I believe in 2014 or 2016 rather.
No, he came much earlier. He's been here 20 years. So he came in, I think, 2004. Yeah.
Sorry. I missed it by a decade. I'm sorry, Rick, if you're watching. But one of the things he said was when he got here, it was like America was in the 70s, where in the corridors of power, there weren't many in fact, he calls it a lack of diversity. Did you experience a similar thing, albeit a decade later?
Oh, interesting. So you know what? The United States, because of slavery and because of that institution of slavery, has always had, and because of where I'm from in the South, has always had huge numbers of Black people. Some states were actually majority Black during the time of slavery. When people were enslaved, there were majority Black people, no rights, no fundamental rights, but there were some free Blacks. Most, almost, the majority were enslaved. Okay. So, that is sheer number wise very different than the UK, right? The UK, where there's 65 million people here, concentrated in certain areas where therefore it feels like we're much more of the population here in the UK. In Manchester, a bit in Liverpool, a bit in Leeds, a bit in Cardiff, so it feels as though they're these country, but it's very different, the amount of economic heft therefore that we have as a group. So that's what I noticed. The big thing that I noticed, and I have to always say, because Rick has the biggest Black business in the UK. He has 15 billion of assets under management. It's a humongous enterprise and undertaking that he has actually built, with well over 100 employees, and generating lots and lots of money, and people competing to get money into him, behind him as a fund manager.
Wow.
So Rick is he's an exceptional person. I'm glad that he works with me. But if you look at the rest of the people who are also part of my board, Lenny Henry's one of my investors and a board member. Ursula Burns, the first Black woman in the 500 company. I mean, it's just, you go to my meetings, it's like, oh my Lord. Those are you're like talking to Mount Olympus. So it's great. So, but they're all down for the cause, which is very interesting, which is something that's very similar between both countries, the United States and the UK.
Brilliant.
I would say the biggest difference, though, the biggest difference is that the infrastructure which exists as a safety net for Black people, provided by Black people and the Black pound, is very anemic versus the US.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we've had generations of Black leadership educated by Black leadership in the Black colleges and universities. We've had, decades, and in some cases, well over a century of businesses that have been run by, powered by, and made large scale by Black people. So that kind of an ecosystem, which means that you can exist. There's a very famous, this person. There's a very famous comedian, Kevin Hart. Do you know Kevin Hart?
Oh, yes, of course.
You know Kevin Hart from Philadelphia. And then Chris Rock. And there's a television show called The Real Husbands of Hollywood, which is sort of, a play on a reality show. In the show, Kevin Hart is talking, and in one episode he meets up with Chris Rock. And and they describe themselves as how famous they are. And Chris Rock is famous, and Kevin Hart is Black famous. Yeah. So in the United States, you can be very famous and be Black famous. You can be very rich. I mean, that's what Motown was for a long time, Black famous. Ebony was Black famous. They produced the richest Black person in the United States, only serving a Black population. Yeah. BET, Radio One, both public companies that were floated by Black billionaires. Yeah. They're served by Black people for Black people. That's it. So there is a way in which there's this infrastructure in so many newspapers, not just The Voice, but so many newspapers in every city, from Cincinnati to Cleveland. Everyone had a Black newspaper with a Black editor family and sort of their own version of the Murdochs, a media empire as such. Here in the UK, we don't have that kind of infrastructure. I don't know that we need that kind of infrastructure right now because it's a different world. Yeah. But we do need something which allows people to not only compete generally, but to compete specifically. We could actually, can we own the Black hair care products market here in the UK? Organizations like Afrocentrics, organizations like Ruka, organizations like Treasure Trust, that's what they're seeking to do. Can we make them huge scale like Shea Moisture with Richelieu Dennis that was sold to Unilever for 1.6 billion? Of course we can. That's what we need to be doing. And my opinion is that we don't have enough infrastructure. So therefore, Black banks that can loan, Black investment banks that can take you public, all of the sorts of things. If you can't, if the big white companies won't take you, there's an organization that can understand you and will take you, or many organizations, and they'll compete for you. That's the bit of a difference. And if we're on the continent, if we're in Africa, I'm confident in some of our economies, we've got that same dynamic. We've got a dynamic where you have lots and lots of choice. But here we don't have as many choices around that. We don't have as many support systems, and that infrastructure and safety net is what I think creates the other problem. So that when you look high in organizations, there are no Black people that have any power in these organizations. The power, remember the report called The Color of Money, The Color of Power in the UK from 2018, which showed it showed the military, it showed the police, it showed the arts organizations, it showed the government, it showed, and government on many different levels. And it showed how few of those roles were held by Black people. It showed pictures of everybody who was in those positions and how few people were of Black people. You look at the government here in the UK and who's in the cabinet. You look who's enfranchised and who's not. Those are things which are problematic and very worrisome. Yeah. And so those are the things we have to fight against, and what Impact X and other people are doing, including Rick Lewis. We're trying to make sure that we are infusing, whether it be through our educational approaches that are helping people to get into and pay for college and university and then graduate school and then move them on, whether or not it's investing in businesses, whether or not it's investing in arts organizations like Ballet Black or Cheneke, et cetera, or the Kiln, we just continue, or Autograph, we continue to say all those institutions are part of the infrastructure to make us a better and make us a stronger participant in the world as it currently exists.
Wow.
That's a lot there.
Wow. Wow.
We're going to talk about
too much. I'm sorry. I'll stop talking.
No. This is brilliant. we're going to talk about the book specifically in a minute, but I wanted to kind of link what you were saying to something I read in the book about a call you got from Tom Ilube when you were on your way to the States. And I was so excited to hear about that meeting and the Black Hand Gang. And, you know, that made me literally jump out of my chair, because I thought, you know, for too long we've talked about it. We've talked about the problems. We've griped about the problems. But here was a group of people saying, hey, no longer time for griping, no longer time for talking. Let's focus on solutions. So I guess those are some of the things that the Black Hand Gang are grappling with in terms of creating that infrastructure change and, you know, fixing the anemic support system. So guys, if just go out and get this book, you will not regret it. It is such a brilliant read. I don't know if this is an English word, but it is totally unputdownable. Part manifesto, part biography, but all Eric Collins. So we've been speaking to Eric Collins, CEO of Impact X Capital, but also the author of the newly released book, We Don't Need Permission, How Black Businesses Can Change Our World. Eric, tell us a little bit about the book. What was your motivation for writing it? Who should read it? And what transformation or what do you want them to get from the book? I know that's a lot there.
Well, can I be very honest? I've never been the person who said, I want to write a book. Yeah. I've never said that to anyone, that was my goal. And I don't know why, but it just wasn't a goal that I had. And I think because I'm such a reader and I love reading other people's work, and I can't imagine the mental, you know, focus as well as the physical activity necessary to get some of the great books that I was just reading Octavia Butler's book series about the parables. And, you know, when you read those sorts of things, you're like, good Lord. I mean, this is fantastic. She's created this world. She has created these and, you know, it comes to a conclusion that is, you know, unexpected and fantastic. And you sort of say to yourself, that's the transcendent experience that I wish to that I want to have. Am I going to give that to anybody in a book that I write? And it's like, well, we'll see. So I had to be persuaded a little bit that this made good sense. And then the other thing that I had to be persuaded about was that I'm a person who has a particular fact pattern. We all have this particular fact pattern. Judy, Birmingham, mother, teacher, mother retrains, you know, middle child. There's this fact pattern that creates a series of vignettes that are both remembered and not remembered. And my friend Ursula Burns said to me, you know, you don't go through your life writing the book saying that these are the episodes that are most impactful. You have to look backward and then say sort of, what do you want to pick out? And what are you going to let go of all those other important events? And so it's just not that kind of editing is not what I'm used to. It's just not how I think about the world. So in writing this book, I finally decided that if we could write sort of a bit of the passion that we have in Impact X about social change and inequality, and that we can present a new argument, not that we should do that, you know, that there are inequalities that exist in the world, and we don't need to prove that. That's given. Yeah. But the question is, what do we do in addition to everything that we have done? We've voted, we've marched, we've collaborated, we've sued, we've done everything to force our way to the table, and you know, and still we're not in the promised land. Still we're not saved. And so, what do we need to do in order to get salvation? I don't want my nieces and nephews and godchildren to have the same kinds of conversations, and obviously they won't. But they ought to have a very qualitatively different experience than I've had. It should be so improved that I would not even recognize their lives. And that's not going to happen using the methods, which are incremental methods that we have right now. But who is going to write about those other alternative strategies, if not me? Yeah. So that's why I had to write the book, to write about the, you know, from experience. I have seen, while sitting at the tables of power, while being one of the people who has been empowered for various reasons, I have seen the opportunity to bend the to bend capitalism to the needs of a group that I want to have influence by us. Now, the problems of capitalism are exploitative. It means that someone's going to feel the burden of that. And it just doesn't happen on its own. It's not a benign system. However, it is a system that can be utilized in certain sorts of ways. And the results of capitalism are then being used by various people, George Soros, the Wellcome Trust, other people, to try and then make other sort of change. But it's not their primary focus ever. Black people and empowerment and equality are never their primary focus. And if we don't have those pockets of capital to be able to sustainably and constantly focus on the issue of how do we get social justice and equality, even when we're at war with the Ukraine, it does not change that Black women are still receiving less money on a per pound basis than their white male counterparts, and receiving less than any other group. There might be a few groups that are below that, but Bangladeshi women, Pakistani women, etc. But just in general are underpaid for the same sorts of work. That has not gone away. And just because there is a war in the Ukraine, which is an important thing, and we're all interested as people who are in the UK and in Europe, we need to focus and continue to focus hard on changing the position of young Black people. Because 1 in 2 Black Britons as of 2018, this is in 2022, 2018, we're living below the poverty line. If we're going to change that, we cannot wait 3 decades for that to change. We can't sort of have incremental sort of equality coming so that we cut down a little bit. So we cut down 1% a year, and it's going to take us 50 years to get everyone out of poverty. We need things that are going to help us now. Black people who start big Black businesses hire Black people and women in key roles. Those Black people and women utilize their capital in different sorts of roles. Black Pound Day, Black empowerment through capital focusing and deliberate activity of capital being put into various places where you shop, who you support and who you don't support. All those things will make a big difference. So for me, the book had to be written. It had to be written by someone like me, and it needs to be written now. We do not want to waste another minute. We certainly don't want to waste another generation. So why not write it now and get it out?
Okay. And when somebody picks up your book and is reading it, what kind of transformation do you want to see? What kind of thinking do you want them to start having? And what viewpoints do you want them to change?
Excellent question, Colin. I want them to become less local, and I want them to become much more deliberate and understand that they are an agent of change today, and that they can, with just a little bit of a flip in their thinking, become a deliberate utilizer of the resources that they have. And those resources should be pointed in places that support them and advance their communities. That's what we want to do. Stop giving your money to places. Stop investing in places. Stop spending time with people who are undermining your very existence, and believe that the white supremacy should keep you in right where you are. So that's the first thing. So everyone should get that message. So even if you're not a business person, get that message. And the second message is, and if you are a business person, I need you to think bigger. And when I say I need you to think bigger, all economies are driven by small businesses. And most small businesses in the UK, if you're a small Black business, or if you're a Black business at all, not even a small Black business, the median income for a small Black business, the median turnover is, that meaning 50% is above this number and 50% is below this number, £25,000 a year. Which, if you live in London, is just keeps you a little bit above, I believe, if I have this correct, the livable wage. So you are just replacing a livable wage. You're not going to be able to employ other people, not even your family members. You're really not going to be able to buy a house in London with that kind of an income based on sort of criteria and the like. I need people to think a little bit bigger. And I don't need people just to think about lifestyle. And therefore, I want to be able to afford an Audi e-tron, or I want to be able to afford a Maserati. What I want them to be thinking about is that I can be a global organization. I need to think about how I can make this not just relevant in my neighborhood, but how I can make it relevant in my region, how I can then make it relevant in my country, how I can make it relevant in this territory called Europe and the UK, and how I can make it relevant in the world. How do I become that competitive? And that the idea is not can I afford a little bit more so I can take a better vacation? It's, can I create more jobs? Can I create 10,000 jobs?
Yeah.
Because if you can create 1,000 jobs, 10,000 jobs, even 100 jobs, that is very different and such a vehicle for societal change.
That's a
That
game
is what
changer.
I want people. Yeah, that's what I want people to take from this. And so you can take an individual lesson, even if you're not in the business of, starting businesses and growing businesses. But if you are in the business, I challenge you to think bigger and to think more globally. Because certainly Jeff Bezos did not say, when he named, and there's one of these chapters, right? He did not name his company Thames. He named his company Amazon because it's the biggest river in the world by far. It's the biggest thing going. And therefore, he understands all those tributaries. He didn't name it Mississippi. He didn't do any of that. He named it after his aspiration. And he had a global vision, and a vision that was extreme in terms of its size and scope, because he believes that he can change the world. And I believe that there are Black women who can change the world and actually have the necessary lived experience and have the foresight as to what is useful in the world to actually create the companies that will rival all of these and be the ones that we're talking about within a generation. Because it's a business that can happen in a generation. Other things take more time. Business can happen in a generation. You can go from nothing to dominance in a very short period of time.
Wow.
Honestly, Eric, I know you keep saying that we're flattering, but it really isn't flattering. We're sitting here, and I know what this man is like, and you're speaking our language, our shared passions and vision, and I feel like people, listeners, you need to not just go and get the book and read the book. You need to have your notebook. You need to be taking up the lessons and actioning them. You know what, in education we call it using and applying. You need to really be intentional. It really is beyond, it's not a typical, it's beyond a good read. It's beyond a good read, so
it's part manifesto, part biography, part business book, all in one. And that's what makes it particularly relevant to the Black community, because we can see ourselves in the pages of this book. We can see our challenges, we can see the stuff that we knock against, but more importantly, we can see a way out. And that's about economic empowerment, and that comes across really, really strongly in the book. So thank you so much. Personally, I'm pleased you've written the book, and I'm sure hundreds of thousands, dare I say millions of people having read it will be pleased that you wrote the book as well.
It's awesome. There's a chapter that I want to highlight. So step 8 in the process is invest in women to create alpha. So can you tell our listeners, all of them, and the female listeners, what you mean about that?
What I mean by that, thank you for giving me this opportunity, because I do think that this is very key. We in various communities around the world, and I think almost all communities, particularly communities of color, we spend a lot of time not only making sure that we are celebrating the women around us, the women in our lives, and certainly they are the bedrocks of most of our communities. But then also there are ways in which we undermine, particularly in the business world, the contributions that could be made by women and women of color in particular. And my point to be made is that, look, if we continue to do that, we do so at our peril. That when you think about building a society, when you invest in women, women tend to reinvest in family. They reinvest in community. They reinvest in education. They reinvest in buildings, meaning homes and that sort of thing, all of which are the necessary pieces to build a very strong society. There was one quote that I really wanted to have in this book, and each one of the chapters starts with a quote. And there's a quote by Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to be elected to represent her district in Congress in the hundreds of year history of the United States. She's the first Black woman to actually have that distinction. She's from New York. And she wrote that if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And for me, that is such a lesson for what we're up against as Black women. But the thing that is going to be the great enabler is the tenacity and the willingness to bring themselves into situations that are otherwise they're not being invited to. They're not asking permission to be at the table. They will be at the table, and they'll be at the table, the ones that exist. And if they don't find themselves at those tables, they will create other tables.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from my perspective, all of that is very much why you invest in women. The word alpha is a technical term used in the investment industry to talk about profit. It's really a showing of profit when you're talking about investing, that you want to show that you actually have, like ImpactX has a 4.5x return. The alpha is above the amount that people invested in does. What is it that you're returning to them? That's the alpha. Okay. And Black women will return an inordinate amount of alpha, and already do in certain situations. I use the example of Kathy Hughes. I use the example of Pat McGrath. I use the example of, you can use the example of Rihanna. You can use, there are many, many, just go on and on and on in terms of the women and the Black women who are returning to investors a great amount of alpha. And so we believe that we can just follow that script, finding places that are both expected and unexpected in which women are participating, and find that those deep wells of experience, therefore the ability to disrupt, and therefore invest in those for benefit. We've got organizations in our portfolio at ImpactX. There's Butonomy that is dealing with influencers, social media influencers, and how they monetize their lives, particularly women who are women of color and makeup and other sort of places, and how we use artificial intelligence and technology in order to help them to actually make this not just an avocation, but as micro influencers, how to make it an actual career and a business. We have another business, Our Grid, where the founder there is a woman who has helped to create an approach to making sure that all of those scientific research and studies that go on an annual basis, 80% of them come to nothing, but to how to increase that percentage so we get more medicines and more efficacy out in the world as quickly as possible. We've already talked about Afrocentrics. We have a femme tech company called Health and Her that looks at the perimenopausal and menopausal space to women out of Cardiff. We have any number of women who are part of our media and entertainment portfolio who are writing interesting sorts of projects and sort of the talent behind what it is that we're doing in order to try and create stories that are women-based and sort of strong women focused, but then in front of and behind the camera have all of the attributes that we'd like to see so that we can actually build a sustainable ecosystem. So we've got example after example after example of where there are Black women in the world who are creating alpha, and they're doing it all over the UK as well as they're doing it in Europe and around the world. Can I do one thing before I have 3% left on my battery. Can I just go get my plug so that I can actually?
Of course.
Take me 2 seconds.
This is awesome. I feel like I needed my notebook. Seriously, I'm gonna have to.
So guys, sorry, as Eric does that, it's 19 minutes past. He needs to go at 11:30. Yeah. So there are 2 questions left. I don't know if you want to like kind of wrap that up into one question.
I think we can wrap that up into one. 14 and 15 is really about we can do that, and then we go into the quickfire round.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just be vigilant, because I don't want to rush at the end of the interview, but I want to be mindful of Eric's time.
No worries. No worries.
Thanks, Keish.
Thank you so much. You're doing a fab job, by the way.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, dear. Take an opportunity.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
All right.
Eric, thank you so much. Most of our interviews are done by now, but
this is brilliant.
We are just so pleased that you are unpacking so many gems.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I'm glad this is helpful. I like your questions. Most people aren't this prepared. This is so. I have many interviews where I get no preparation. It's not me for being prepared, because that's often the case, but them not seeming to have done any sort of research. But you have done a lot of research.
Thank you.
People need to know.
Yeah, we wouldn't be serving you or indeed our audience if we weren't prepared.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yeah, that's great.
So we've been speaking to Eric Collins, author of We Don't Need Permission, How Black Businesses Can Change Our World, CEO of Impact X Capital. And he's just explained about some of the businesses that Impact X are involved in. And it makes sense now why The Times has said you're one of the most powerful businessmen in Britain. And also it makes sense that you've been on the UK Black Power list because you are quietly just disrupting and changing our world, changing the game and creating a whole lot of change, a lot of change that hasn't been seen around for a while. So Eric, tell us what the next 12 months look like. In fact, two-part question. What does the next 12 months look like for you in terms of some of the stuff you want to see in terms of you being involved in? And also, what do you want your legacy as a Black Brit, I had to get that in, to be in this country and beyond?
So I'm in uncharted territory, Colin and Judy. Books are, sometimes they are, what do you say? They're sort of coasters on tables because they come and go very, very quickly. Sometimes they're more. And so the question of what will happen with We Don't Need Permission and how that will then, because everything that you do changes your life in some ways. You know, that, what is it? The butterfly in the Congo by flapping its wings, creates a hurricane in the United States. The question of what will happen is still to be determined, and a lot of it will be determined by partnering with people like you to have conversations like this that maybe interest people and takes this beyond a moment and maybe moves it a little bit further. I don't know that it becomes a movement, but at least maybe becomes a memory for people, and in the back of their minds they remember, I just don't need permission, and they do something a little different. So that would be, maybe what the next 12 months will be, and I'll be on the street and people will be stopping me. My hope is that people will stop me and say, you know what, Eric, I don't need permission to this. I didn't need permission to do that. That would be wonderful. Now, I hope at the same time that they do some better photoshopping, and so I look a little thinner. But we'll deal with that.
You look absolutely fine.
We'll deal with that differently, and another way. I have to talk to the editor of the book. And what I'll be doing with Impact X is we're going to continue to be investing in these companies. We have a portfolio of about 25 projects. Some of them have exited at this point. Some of them, sadly, which is the business model for organizations like ours. Some of them have gone bust. But we are, going to be managing that portfolio, investing in a lot of other organizations. We'll always be raising money to invest so that we can then put that money to work in the ways that make sense. And then we will be talking as much as possible. One thing that will not stop is we'll be talking as much as possible about why it's important to be change agents on an individual, a group, and an institutional basis for the next 12 months. We will be, to whomever will listen, and even those who don't necessarily want to listen, we will make it our business to amplify that message, because we know that we will be better served as businesses, we'll be better served as individuals, and certainly as communities when we have businesses that are working. And we'll be talking to the government about it. We'll be talking in the media about it. We'll be pressing everyone and working and partnering with other organizations like the Black Equity Organization, the new Civil Rights Organization, which has just started to sort of compete with, to sort of replicate what the NAACP and the Urban League did in the United States here in the UK. We are going to be partnering with all these organizations because we believe that it is not, and we have no interest in being alone. We have no interest in being the exception. We want to become part of the rule. So hopefully we become more and more embedded within a stronger and stronger ecosystem and become less strange, less sort of exceptional, that we become very much what everyone else is doing, and they see the benefit, and we're bringing and attracting much more money, much more time and energy to this idea of making sure that businesses that are run by women, people of color, particularly Black women, are doing what can be done and reaching their full potential.
Brilliant. Well, one of the chapters in your book is Bet on Black. I'm going to paraphrase that slightly. Bet on Eric Collins. If we've seen anything from the passion, from just his enthusiasm and his motivation and his experience, which is, you know, massively important. We reckon the next 12 months is going to be a game changer in terms of the impact of this book. And I'm sure there'll be people walking around saying, yeah, you're right. We don't need permission. I'm going to start that business. I'm going to employ 1,000 people. I'm going to change the game in terms of economic empowerment for the people of this country, that other countries across Europe and the globe can look at and say, actually, this all started with a manifesto from a gentleman called Eric D. Collins, Henry and Adeline's son.
And the church said, amen, amen, amen.
Amen, amen. Yeah. And once again, Eric, that is not flattery. It's not flattery. This is so needed.
Yeah.
You talked about the structure over here being a little anemic. Yeah, this is refreshing, very refreshing.
And, you know, you can probably see behind us, there's some books there.
Yes.
Not many of these people look like us and understand what our experiences are. And that's why I'm so excited about reading this, because theories are fine, principles are fine, but when you put lived experience and shared lived experience in, it takes it to another level. So
absolutely.
We're mindful of your time, so we're going to do the quick fire round, which we will just close out with. So, are you ready for the quick fire? Now, normally it's the quick fire dozen, but of course for you we had to have the baker's dozen, so we've got 13.
13, okay.
13. Lucky number 13. So, first one: jollof rice or rice and peas?
That's so mean. I can't have a little of both, huh? I would say at the moment, I'm a bit obsessed with jollof rice. I can't explain it, but when I went to Ghana in 2019 and had some jollof rice in Ghana, and then I came back and started tasting at different tables from friends from Sierra Leone, friends from Nigeria. You know, I began to realize that it's not the same thing. So I'm having the great experience of experimenting with many different jollof rices.
Good. Good.
Yes.
I'm glad you said that, because I didn't want to upset the Nigerians. Such a diplomat. Well done.
Yeah. We like that idea. We have done that.
In fact, we had some jollof rice on Saturday night, didn't we? At this party. So.
Right. So the next one then, plantain or plantain?
Oh, see, I'm from the American South. It's plantain. Plantain.
Yeah.
It's plantain. Yeah.
I like it. I like it. Beach holiday or city break?
City break.
Okay.
Even though I love the water and I love the beach, a break for me would be in the city. Being on the beach, I get a little antsy. Let's just put it that way. That makes me nervous.
I can see that, because you want to make things happen and you want to be close to the action. I can so see that. To be honest, I can't see you lounging on a beach for too long, if at all.
My family reunion is always, we come from a part of the U.S. that is on a peninsula between the Atlantic Ocean and Chesapeake Bay, and so there are beaches on both sides. And we actually have it at a beach, a place that's sort of a beach resort, and you know, we spend all of 25 minutes there, and the rest of the time, which is a 3-day affair, is spent eating, quite frankly. It's really just eating. So there you go.
I'm hoping you're going to introduce jollof rice to the next one.
You know, we need to, but there's no one who can do it so well. Although I got a good recipe the other day by someone who swears that he is the jollof rice maker for his Nigerian family. And I was like, yeah, right. But he swore to me that that's the case, that he's the best cook, and that they all admit it, that he's the best one. I'm like, I've never heard that before.
Could you send that across to Keisha?
Yeah, there you go. I will send that across. I'll get that recipe right.
Definitely.
Right, what have I got? I've got cash flow or capital appreciation.
Okay.
At different times, I would say different things, but I would say at the moment, capital. Well, I would say in the inflationary times, cash flow. I would say in general, my default is always capital appreciation. Always capital appreciation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Makes sense.
I mean, what do you need cash flow in order to buy things?
Yeah.
Just put off buying and just keep on accumulating cash.
Yeah.
But I want people not to accumulate cash through small things. Even I think real estate's a great thing. Don't hear me say don't buy real estate. Buy your real estate. Stop giving people rent. But I would say that the kind of appreciation that I want to see is what I see in Marshmallow and not what I see in the housing market. I just, it's a whole different scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. I like that. Netflix or YouTube?
YouTube every day. I love myself some Netflix, but YouTube is the best invention.
Yeah.
I spent the other day, can I just say this one thing? This is just to you. You don't have to put this on. But I was sitting there and I'm watching how did I get to Tom Jones singing with Stevie Wonder, a medley on the Tom Jones variety show. It's like the craziest thing, and sort of Stevie Wonder with that wonderful voice, with all that virtuosity, that sort of very, that kind of boy soprano, sort of tenor voice. And then you have Tom Jones and all that sort of, crazy kind of, testosterone. And it's just the combination is fascinating to watch. But that's the kind of thing that you can find only on YouTube. Netflix doesn't even compare to what is the content available in the most obscure places of YouTube.
Unless we do movies by Eric.
There you go.
And then bring it in.
There you go.
Netflix, you need movies by Eric. Right. Okay, so keeping it then musical, reggae or Afrobeats?
It depends upon what's going on. So reggae, I love in a relaxation. There's nothing so relaxing as reggae and, Bob Marley, for instance. It's just the sound. If I were at the beach, right? The sound of that. But if I'm really talking about what I like to hear in terms of the sound of protest and the sound of change, I like Afrobeats.
Yeah.
For that.
Different energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. All right. So on that note, listening to music or listening to a podcast?
Music.
Okay. Okay.
I find because a podcast, I love a podcast, but a podcast is a one-way conversation. It's a broadcasting, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm listening to music, music stimulates in a way that actually unlocks my creativity. I'm often finding myself when I'm at a podcast focusing so much on trying to get the point that, and then, there's so many podcasts that there's an infinite amount of music, but there's so many podcasts that I then, and I'm often consuming them right one after the other. It's sort of like reading a short story or a poem and then reading a next one right after. I just don't seem to get the same kind of inspiration. That's an instant inspiration, whereas the music, it sort of gets into another part. It's not just here, it's also here and then in the gut and in the soul. And there's something about that which is a real creative space. Yeah. So for me, it's always music.
I like it. Yeah. It's more emotive and more evocative.
It takes you places. It transports you to places that I don't find podcasts do.
Okay, brilliant.
All right. Okay, so the next one, dark chocolate or milk chocolate?
Ooh.
I'm lactose intolerant, dark chocolate.
Right.
Okay.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah. Stocks and shares or crypto?
Oh God, stocks and shares, please. Oh, please.
I thought you'd say that.
Yeah. And the only reason I say stocks and shares, and I'm sure, and the crypto, I'm confident is going to be, there's great wealth that's being created by crypto. And I believe that people should certainly use that. In my world, stocks and shares are a great way to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. And then Samsung or Apple?
Samsung every day.
Now you're talking.
And Samsung, for me, is because Samsung has been more supportive of the businesses that I have been working with. Really? They have, when I started in my technology life working with mobile companies and mobile and handset manufacturers, and Samsung was one of those that took a lot of bets early on, and Apple was always a place that kept us at arm's length, and so I am a die-hard Android and Samsung person.
Well, hey, we're Samsung.
Welcome to the club.
Well done, you. Well done, you all.
Interestingly enough, our kids are now Apple enthusiasts.
Oh, yeah.
And they're trying to get us over to that, but
no.
We're not happening.
No.
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. And I also think, and the other thing I like is that Samsung is people of color, right? They're Asian, and they are in that family. It's, I mean, it is, not a black company, but these are people of color who are dealing on a worldwide scale and on a worldwide stage. And when I have dealt with that group, with that organization, I have found myself, embraced in my technologies, engaged. And so I work with organizations, like I said, that work with me. I'm not going to work with organizations that do not work with me. And I have not found that Apple is working with me in the same way that Samsung is.
Okay. Brilliant. Okay, so for Eric Collins, is it a night in or a night out?
Night in, all the time. The family wishes they could get me out of the house. What are you all?
Say again?
The family wishes they could pry me out of the house. So what are you all? Are you night in or night out?
We like to have a good night out once in a while.
Once in a while.
But we're a little bit cerebral sometimes in terms of consuming books and stuff. But every now and again, we like to just go out and let my hair down. I
let mine down too and go away.
Or let my hair out.
Yeah, I send my hair out on its own. It just goes out on its own, and it's been gone for years now.
That's the one. That's the one.
Yeah. You guys are being really modest. You wear it well. You wear it well. So, right. What have I got? Oh, Pepsi or Coke?
Pepsi.
Oh,
Pepsi. Okay. It's sweeter. It's sweeter. It has more sugar.
Oh, you have a sweet too.
Oh yeah. I love sweets. Oh my goodness, my favorite food group, sugar.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
All right. Okay.
Pepsi.
Sugar and fat, and if you put the two together, it's called a cake. I'm even happier. It's like for ice cream. It's like if I could eat ice cream, I'd use all the vegan substitutes. Love it. Love.
Okay.
Okay. And the last question, which is the pièce de résistance, the question to end all questions, the question that will change everybody's perception of who you are.
Yep.
It's a big one.
Okay.
Hurry goat or oxtail?
Ooh. Oxtail.
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 Thank you so much.
Really? Oh, really? Okay. I got it right? Oh, yeah. Oxtail. There's something about oxtail and oxtail soup and oxtail soup. Oh, it's good. That's some good stuff. Yeah.
It is good. It is good.
I knew there was something I liked about you.
Oh, there you go.
Other than all the other brilliant stuff that you do.
Yeah. No.
Eric, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for being on the Pitch Black unboxing show. But thank you more than all for all that you're doing through Impact X.
Yeah.
And thank you for this absolutely brilliant book.
Yeah.
We Don't Need Permission: How Black Businesses Can Change Our World. It's a manifesto. It's part biography. It's a business book with some steps. But it's 100% Eric Collins. Eric Collins, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Judy. Thank you, Colin. It has been such a pleasure. It's really been quite a pleasure to have a conversation with you all today and to think about various topics. You all think differently than a lot of the other people with whom I spend time in terms of interviews. And it's good and it's refreshing. I feel as though I'm ready for a day. I feel as though I have been energized for a day at the work that needs to happen. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Guys, go out and get the book. The book is now out. Make sure you go and get it from all major bookstores, Amazon, Waterstones, wherever you buy your books. Make sure you go and get it. And also make sure you visit pitchblackmagazine.com and download the current issue of the magazine, which is always free. So thank you so much. Hey, go out there, change your world, and make it happen.
And you don't need permission.
No.